Yo, what is up guys, Bob87 King here, back again with another video. In this video, we're going to be ranking the top 10 best total drama players of all time, which is a video that I've been wanting to make for the longest time now, but obviously, I've mentioned this a lot, I just don't think many total drama players are that great. Even in the top 10, there's players that have many holes within their game, and just overall, I believe there's 3 players that I feel like I was confident in putting in the top 10, but outside of that, it's a very scrambled top 10, but I am confident that these are the 10 best players of all time, so there's that at least. And let's just go, starting off with the honorable mentions on the list and people who I did consider, but just didn't make the list, so yeah. I did consider Owen. I considered pretty much every single finalist, and to be honest, if I made this video like a lot earlier, I feel like Owen probably would have been on the top 10. And to be honest, while his island game is decent, and I feel like he does pretty much beat everyone in a jury vote because that's what the finale was supposed to be. It was supposed to be a jury vote with everyone in the merge, and I feel like he does beat Gwen, he would beat Duncan, he would obviously beat Heather. And to be honest, he doesn't beat Lashana, but I feel like Lashana was going home anyways at the final 5, but that's just whatever. In his action game, even though you could say he gets screwed over by Courtney coming back, I feel like he was going home anyways. I feel like Lindsay and Beth probably would have sided with Justin to that point where Owen would have just went home anyways. I feel like him losing Izzy is also pretty bad, but yeah, there's that. In World Tour, I feel like he mainly makes it as far as he does, probably due to production interference, which also hinders the list a lot to where it's like how much of it's real gameplay and how much is it like production pretty much just benefiting their favorite characters. So yeah, there's that. And while you could say that Owen would make it far given any Soul Drama season, like if you put him on a cast with Pocketail Island, I feel like Owen would do well. I just feel like none of it's really that intentional. So yeah, Owen is here as an honorable mention. I did consider Gwen, and to be honest, you could argue Gwen could be on the list. To be honest, I don't really have that much faults with Gwen as a player. I just feel like there's just better players here. So yeah, Gwen is an honorable mention. I did consider Lashana, mainly because of her strong run in Island. And even if she, if the final 5 round played out normally, I feel like Lashana probably would have went home anyways. I feel like Duncan, Owen, and Heather probably would have teamed up against Lashana or Gwen at that point. I feel like Lashana's clearly the biggest threat at that point. And then in action, I feel like it's nice that she was able to bounce back. And to be honest, if it wasn't for production, just blatantly trying to help Duncan win action, I feel like, she probably would have made it a lot more farther in my opinion. But then again, I feel like the people like Lindsay and Beth probably would have flipped on her at some point. And in World Tour, she obviously does get played by Alejandro. I feel like LaShawn was relatively close to making the list. I just felt like they were just better players, so yeah. I did consider Izzy because, Izzy isn't crazy, but she hasn't had a deep run in the game for me to really consider her that much into the list. I did consider Courtney because she at least has a decent strategic mind for the game. And this kind of goes for the people like Julia or an MK or a lot of the other villainous characters. I just feel like while their strategic game is good, their social game is definitely lacking. And for Courtney's case, I feel like Courtney will annoy a lot of people around her to where people will just vote her out just for being really annoying. And I feel like she does get screwed over in Island because, to be honest, it doesn't make sense for Harold to just rig out Courtney. It would make more sense for him to rig out Duncan, but then again, production wanted to keep Duncan in the game, so that's whatever. I feel like Courtney is a character that just is very high variance, honestly. And while she would have done very well in Island, I feel like her action game kind of sucked, and then her World Tour game was pretty bad. And her All-Star game was just kind of mid, to be honest. So yeah, Courtney is here. From Revenge of the Island, I did consider Cameron, mainly just because, he won the season. And I feel like Cameron is just someone who can't keep a secret, someone who will overreact and get too emotional. And while he has a decent strategic mind for the game, his terrible challenge performances just really put him down on the list for me. Did consider Lightning. The problem with Lightning is that he sucks socially, and I feel like socially is the most important part to really do well in total drama. And as we saw in All Stars, he was just voted at the first opportunity, so yeah, Lightning kind of sucks. Did consider Joe. Problem with Joe, again, similar to Lightning, her social game's kind of lacking. And not to mention, she was kind of voted off at the second opportunity against Heather, someone who is known for not being well liked by her team, so yeah, Joe is here. Did consider Sean, because I feel like if Pocketail Island played out for another season, Sean would do very well. But I feel like on any other cast, Sean would be a very early boot if his team loses challenges. Because Sean is someone who just doesn't talk to much people, and I feel like he's not the greatest socially. So while he has a decent strategic mind for the game as well, I just feel like he won't ever really apply it socially. I did consider Jasmine, as she is a very well-rounded player, but the problem with Jasmine is that I feel like, same with Cameron, she gets way too emotional. I feel like her entire stick of being mad at Sean was just a very dumb reason to be mad at someone. Not to mention she gets too attached to where she was going to split the money, and I feel like her selflessness, is that the word for it? I don't know, but I feel like that will definitely cost her a lot in total drama seasons to where she could get taken advantage of from a main villain. So yeah, Jasmine is here as an honorable mention. I did consider Scarlet, and Scarlet was actually on the list before I talked to my brother about it. Then he was like, "No, why is she on here?" So thanks. But Scarlet is a player that I have a lot of confidence in, to where she is decent enough physically and also good strategically and also kind of good socially. Not the best, but it's like still solid enough to where out of all the introverts like an MK, I feel like I would have more faith in Scarlet doing well. The problem with Scarlet is one, she wasn't trying to win the game, and two, if she ever were to come back, I feel like most people would think she's crazy and vote her out early. So yeah, that's kind of the problem with Scarlet. I feel like her game's just not consistent unless she told everyone that like she changed and blah blah blah. And if they all believe her, then I feel like she could do well in another season. But yeah, Scarlet is here. From the most recent season, and pretty much the number 11 on the list, we do have Priya. And the main reason why Priya isn't on is similar to Jasmine. I feel like she would get too emotional. And strategically, she's pretty messy. I feel like her voting out Damien was a very big mistake. I feel like her voting out Millie is a sign that she might be too emotional for the game. And while she's great physically and one of the most talented people, I feel like no one even really noticed that or really respected her, which is kind of crazy, but yeah, Priya's here mainly just because she's not the great strategically, not really the best socially either, so yeah, she's at number 11. And let's just begin with the top 10, starting off with someone who is kind of in Priya's archetype of being the athletic girl, and that is Sky. And I feel like Sky will do well in any given season of the show, with or without production interference. I feel like she is a great leader for her team, to where her team was never going to vote her off, and though she gets swapped over to the other team, Topher is going to go home, and even if they lose again, I feel like Scarlet probably would have went home. I feel like her social game is just overall pretty great, to where she's not going to annoy anybody there. Physically, she's very solid as well. She's a gymnast, athletic, and also hot. And not to mention, strategically, while you could argue the entire Dave situation was very messy, at least it was able to where Dave goes home. And he pretty much sacrifices his game for Sky, to where Sky was probably going to go home if Dave just didn't vote himself out. So yeah, there's that. I just feel like Sky's a well-rounded player. She would do well in any given season, and the reason why she's not higher is because we didn't really see how the end game played out, and that's why she's not higher on the list, because Scarlet and Max got removed, and then it was a pretty much an auto elimination to send home Jasmine, and then the final three was a auto elimination to send home Sugar. And to be honest, it's kind of a knock that Shauna and Sugar probably would have taken each other and not Sky, but that's just whatever. Sky is at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is someone who I was not expecting to be on the top 10. And if this was a character ranking, she would be nowhere near the top 10. Probably top 10 least favorite characters, but that is Beth. And I feel like Beth does kind of get screwed over in Island, as much as I hate to admit it. Being someone who gets screwed over because she has a Tiki doll idol and it's causing the team to have bad luck, and which, in my opinion, I don't know why they still voted off Beth. In my opinion, it makes more sense to vote Heather, but then again, production, so there's that. And I feel like if she wasn't voted off and they sent home Heather, I feel like Beth would have been in a pretty solid spot, being friends with Lindsay, being friends with Lashana, and with Lashana comes in Gwen, and with Gwen comes in Trent, and who knows what would have happened if Beth stayed at that point. And then in action, while she does have some messy points at points to where she was going to lose Lindsay at the DJ quit, so there's that. I feel like Beth plays at least a solid enough game in action, and I feel like Beth is someone who comes off likable, not as a viewer, but at least to the people around her, to where even though she is kind of nerdy and people will make fun of her, I feel like she's someone who isn't annoyingly offensive, so there's that. I just feel like Beth is a pretty solid all-around player, so yeah, she is at number 9. Coming in at number 8, we have probably one of the most iconic characters of the entire show, and one of the most iconic players, because a lot of people say that she played insanely poorly. Some say that she's the queen of the game, and that is Heather. Heather is a real mixed bag, and to be honest, I think it's because of production favoritism that really makes it hard for me to think of her as one of the best players of all time, because it doesn't feel like she survived certain rounds of the game naturally. Cody pretty much getting medically evacuated, the Beth round, the Trent challenge, which was a very flawed idea of her trying to pretty much kiss Trent and trying to manipulate Trent when Trent literally saw all of her antics, but that's whatever, I guess. And also due to the challenge just pretty much being rigged for Heather, she wins anyways, but that's whatever, I guess. The DJ round, where if it was a normal round of the game, she would have went home. The Izzy round is still pretty confusing to my mind. And while she does survive the Justin round in a 5-4 to 1 vote, and probably would have gotten Lashana out because she probably would have gotten Duncan and Owen to flip, she loses against anybody in the finale. In a jury vote, which was the planned finale, like, she would have lost against Owen, she would have lost against Gwen, she would have lost against Duncan, she would have lost against Lashana, she would have lost against Jeff. And in my opinion, even if it was like a final battle challenge, I feel like everyone would have rallied up against Heather to make sure she lost the game. So yeah, in my opinion, her island game definitely has some pros, but there's a lot of flaws to it. Her World Tour game also has a lot of minor flaws, but not as much as Island, where she was supposed to be voted out in episode 8, but gets saved due to an elimination round. She's so confident that the final two is going to be a jury vote, but yet she votes up Duncan, someone who's probably one of the more least likely players to win the game, but that's just whatever, I guess. She is technically able to get out Alejandro at the final four until Sierra is an idiot and blows up the plane, so that kind of sucks for Heather. But she is able to get out Alejandro, which was pretty great in my opinion. Alejandro was running circles around Heather up until that point, and I feel like if it was a jury vote, Heather would have slammed against Alejandro. Obviously it wasn't, but yeah, there's still that, and there still is the case. In action, she was actually going to be in a decent spot until Lashana actually, decided to rise up above it and was able to get Duncan and Harold to flip back to her side and get out Heather, which does suck. But the fact that Heather was almost this close to making the merchant action is something that we have to appreciate. Obviously, would she be on the bottom? Probably. But I feel like the likes of a Duncan, Courtney, and Harold probably could have helped her throughout the entire game. Also, Heather's very good strategically. She is great at making people a bigger target than her, like she did with Trent and Island, what she did with Gwen in Action, what she did with Alejandro in World Tour, and then in All Stars. And obviously, you could say that hiding the idol was dumb, but in my opinion, I just don't really fault her that much because her idea wasn't to just show everyone she has the idol, because she has pretty much no pockets, and everyone would have spotted that she had the idol, and yeah, she would have been voted off instantly. In my opinion, I think Heather's just a very well-rounded player. Her social game is lacking, and production favoritism does kind of hurt her a bit, but all around, I think she is a top 10 player, so yeah, Heather is at number 10. Coming in at number 7, we have someone who gets a lot of hate for this strategy, but in my opinion, I've always been a defender of it, and that is Scott. Again, in my opinion, throwing challenges to make sure your team goes home one by one while being in a good position in your team isn't really a dumb strategy, and also once you come into the merge, unless the entire team is unified in a friendship finale, then obviously, yes, it is a dumb strategy, but in Revenge of the Island, in my opinion, that strategy was a pretty smart one because now he comes into the merge as less of a threat. The problem with that is Scott's threat management, and he overall just comes off as a pretty schemy person. Cameron called it out, Mike called it out, and it's just Scott overall as a player, yes, he is smart, and I do believe out of all the mainstream villains, he could repeat his game again. I just feel like a lot of people will see through that, in my opinion. Revenge of the Island cast isn't really the smartest, so I feel like he could have done that very easily if they were to play again, but obviously post Revenge, I feel like they wouldn't have trusted him. But let's say a couple seasons afterwards, kind of like Heather and World Tour, I feel like they would have warmed up to Scott a little bit, just kind of like how Cody was with Heather. So yeah, that's why Scott's above Heather. In my opinion, he suffers throughout less plot armor. And I'm not going to be talking about All Stars with Scott because that is a completely different character. So yeah, Scott is at number 7. Coming in at number 6, and to be honest, number 6 through 4, in my opinion, all could be swapped around, but at number 6 here, we do have the biggest what-if character, and that is DJ. And obviously, DJ is someone who never really gets voted out in any Soul Drama season. In my opinion, he's similar to Scarlet in a sense, to where if they actually did try in the game, I do believe they could have won their seasons. And in Island, obviously, DJ does get screwed over because obviously automatic challenge, and you screamed and ran away first, so that kind of sucked. But if he didn't and Heather goes home, I do believe the guys' alliance of Duncan, Owen, Jeff, and DJ could have ran some things. Obviously, would have Duncan flipped on the likes of Jeff because he's too nice or whatever? Maybe, but I don't think it would have been on DJ, or maybe it could have because DJ is much more nicer than Jeff. And I think a lot of people would have recognized that, so maybe Duncan could have flipped. But in my opinion, it's less likely since, Duncan just doesn't trust women in general. So I feel like DJ could have made it to at least the Final Four. In Action, if he survived, I feel like he could have made a very deep run. It could have been with the likes of a Lindsay, Beth, or even really a Duncan because they were friends. And in my opinion, I think no matter what, DJ could have had a deep run in Action. And I'll make a video on that what if DJ never quit Action, or maybe watch a video if someone has already done that. So, but in World Tour, I do believe if Chris could have just been like, okay, DJ, you're on a team with Alejandro, or you're on a team with Team Amazon, he would have been in a decent enough position, in my opinion. Or if the teams merged earlier, like any normal season, I feel like DJ could have been in a great spot, being in a pretty prime middle tier position. But obviously, Alejandro ends up flipping on him, so that kind of sucks. Overall, I feel like DJ is a great social player, a decent enough physical player, and strategically, I feel like he's a little bit weak on that, but really you don't need to have a great strategic mind for the game. You just need to be pretty great socially. So yeah, DJ is at number 6. Coming in at number 5, we have someone who is the anti-hero of total drama, and that is Duncan. And I think Duncan completely dominated his run in Island, in my opinion, being the leader of his team, pretty much getting whatever he wanted. And outside of getting out Courtney and then being able to get a Harold the same round after, in my opinion, getting kind of production favoritism by Harold not voting him out instead of Courtney, which in my opinion made more sense for him for Harold to at least get out Duncan. But that's whatever, I guess. Duncan still was able to dominate the game. He's one of the more adaptable players of Total Drama, to where once he saw that Trent went home, he's like, okay, all the guys need to stick together to make sure a girl goes home, and then Bridget goes home. The next round, Lindsay goes home, where, in my opinion, the challenge is still a little iffy, but that's whatever. He gets unlucky by the fact that DJ goes home, but then again is able to vote out Izzy, so that's still good for his game. The final 6, I do question him voting out Jeff, in my opinion, but I guess the reasoning is still okay enough, considering he can still control Owen and kind of control Heather to an extent. And then the final 5, I feel like he was safe no matter what. And then the final 4, Chef pretty much just kicks him out, which kind of sucks. In action, he played a pretty bad game, and I've mentioned this before in the past, where I don't think he's strong at all. I think he definitely gets benefited by production favoritism. In the Lashana round, in the Justin round, and in the Lindsay round, all those rounds are pretty much rounds that are just so sketchy to me, to where it's like, I don't know, man, but that's just whatever. World Tour, he plays a pretty bad game, and then in All-Stars, in my opinion, while he had potential to do well because of his connection with Zoey, and maybe he could have built a connection with Cameron, in my opinion, I feel like Zoey probably would have picked Gwen over Duncan, so that's just whatever. And Duncan has a lot of downside, but he also does have a lot of upside, being a good strategic thinker, good socially when he wants to be, and overall is not really the best physically, but he is still pretty competent physically, to where I don't think they would vote him out pre-merge. So yeah, Duncan is at number 5. Coming in at number 4 is someone who I have the least to say about, but I feel like they're generic enough to make it through every season and make it at least pretty far, and that's Mike. And in my opinion, I do believe that Mike could have run Revenge of the Island had he not been screwed over by a very OP twist by Scott having one vote. And if Scott was dumb enough to vote out Joe or Lightning, I feel like, Mike, Zoey, and Cameron could have ran the game at that point, and then Mike most likely ends up winning the season due to him just being the strongest and Zoey probably not turning into Commando Zoey, so there's that. And All Stars, despite being someone who has multiple personalities and someone who could literally win any single challenge if he just pulled Svetlana, or even this season with Mal. Like, he is the strongest person on the cast without a doubt, and yet no one really thinks of him as a threat, so that's pretty good threat management. Not to mention he had Zoey by his side, which Zoey ends up having a lot of great social capital throughout the entire season, so yeah, I think Mike gets benefited from that. And if Mike were to play again, which he seems pretty apt to do, I feel like Mike could do very well given the fact that he has all of his personalities and he would be the strongest person. The problem would just be, would he survive the pre-merge, which in most cases would be yes, because he's not annoying, he's not going to lose a challenge for his team, so yeah, Mike is at number 4. Coming in at number 3, the top 3, which I've always said in the past was my top 3 and always switching around the order. However, I feel like this might be a controversial take because most people believe that he is the best player of all time, and considering who I have even above him, to where, yeah, at number 3, we do have Alejandro. And while Alejandro plays the most impressive game of all time in Total Drama history in World Tour, to where he's pretty much a very dominant player, he runs the entire team victory into the grave. He's able to get out people like Noah, someone who is clearly coming after him, Owen, who is very clearly coming after him, Duncan, who is about to come after him. Like, Alejandro completely decimates World Tour. There are also some decisions that I genuinely do question. I question him getting out DJ and pretty much making DJ lose his confidence, therefore losing the game, because DJ was such a loyal and very strong ally for him. I question him voting out Tyler, because Tyler, once again, was someone who was kind of like Lindsay, very just a mindless sheep for Alejandro's game. Even because if their team loses a challenge, Alejandro for sure goes home, so yeah, there's that. And also the fact that he was supposed to go home at the Final 4 in World Tour, which, if Sierra wasn't an idiot, he would have lost the game, so there's that. In my opinion, Alejandro's World Tour game is great, but there are some major flaws within it, so there's that. And then in All Stars, his game is just not repeatable. After the Heather move, nobody trusts him on his team, which is already bad by the fact that like his team was so quick to just instantly vote him off and just leave Heather out of all people. So yeah, there's that. But I also will give him some props for actually finding the idol. Also, what's it called? Still being in the game after the Joe and Lightning boots, even though he was just walking on his hands. So there's that. I feel like he is good at adapting, but I feel like he's also so see-through after World Tour to where I feel like he would need a Pocketel Island cast or even a Revenge cast to do well. But even then, Revenge is kind of like iffy. But yeah, Alejandro is a great strategic player, great physically, and also pretty decent socially, and actually above average socially. But I just feel like his gameplay style just could not be repeated again. So yeah, he is at number 3. Coming in at number 2, this shouldn't be a surprise considering whenever I do talk about this character, I do have a lot of great things to say. As a matter of fact, I don't really have anything negative to say about him, and that is Bowie. And obviously, there are more downsides to Bowie than Alejandro's Game World Tour, to where Z was going to vote out Bowie had, what's it called, the Julia, Priya, and Millie side actually did side with Z, and then Bowie would have went home. As well as the final 5 round, if Emma won immunity, then for sure Bowie would have went home. However, there is still a lot of greatness to Bowie's game. In my opinion, him pretty much single-handedly voting out Caleb, the biggest threat on his team, was very smart to where Bowie pretty much is kind of the leader of the team. While you could argue it's Wayne and Raj, I just feel like Bowie had a lot more of the strategic control of the team overall. He was pretty much the not really the glue in a sense, but definitely like the main man of the team. So yeah, there's that. I feel like Bowie is decent enough physically, great socially in his season to where I feel like he was great with people like Wayne and Raj. More so Raj, obviously, with Emma, and with Emma comes in Chase, to where I feel like Bowie is always going to know what to do strategically. And obviously, what we saw in episode 12, to where he pretty much masterfully manipulates Julia. And then also masterfully gets Priya and Millie to end up fighting at the finale to where they don't help each other win, to where he's guaranteed a spot in the final 2 and almost won the season. So yeah, Bowie is, in my opinion, a great all-around player. And he does have Duncan upside, to where I feel like most people, while you could argue would be repulsed to work with Bowie, again, he is not Julia, and he's not these other hated characters in the game. So I feel like Bowie will always have allies no matter what position he truly is in. So yeah, Bowie is at number 2. But in my opinion, the main issue of why he's not number 1 is because he only played 1 season and we have to wait until season 2. To where if he makes it far again, he's definitely a locked for number 1. So yeah, Bowie is at number 2. Coming in at number 1, we do have someone who I've kind of been hinting towards being number 1 by saying, oh, you don't need to be good strategically because my number 1 isn't strategically and doesn't really have a brain at all. And that is Zoey. And while Zoey is definitely the most naive player on this entire list, and maybe of all total drama, I feel like Zoey is great socially to where everyone likes her, minus, I guess, Anne Maria. I feel like Zoey's someone who will just always be in a naturally great position just because of how, like, she is overall as a just person. I feel like she's great physically, won a whole bunch of challenges in All-Stars, and won a decent amount of challenges in Revenge for her team and for herself. And while her strategic game is terrible, I feel like it'll never be actively used against her. I mean, obviously, she was manipulated by Scott and pretty much manipulated by Mal the entire time, but she was never going to take these people out. And while obviously Mal was definitely going to take her out relatively soon, he just never had the opportunity to because he was trying to play up to Mike, which indirectly benefited Zoey. Overall, in All-Stars, Zoey was just in the best position the entire season because everyone was just simping for her for really just her personality and being, I guess, the most likable person on the cast, so good for Zoey, I guess. Despite being a terrible character, if she was on 100 seasons of Total Drama, I would believe that she would win at least 90 of them. So yeah, Zoey is at number 1, unfortunately, but yeah, that's kind of the case, so yeah. And yeah, that's the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys made it this far, hopefully you guys enjoyed it because, you know, you watched the entire thing. But yeah, if you didn't, let me know. Let me know your guys' top 10 in the comments down below, and yeah, peace out. Hopefully you guys have a great day.